Little Susy's 6 Birthdays, Part 1, by Elizabeth Prentiss. This is recorded to celebrate the 6th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. To the children who read this book. My dear little friends, this book was written on purpose for you. While I was writing it, I often said to myself, I hope this will please Mally and Willie. I wonder how Sarah and Louisa will like it. Then I thought that I would read what I had written to a few children, to see what they would say, because if it failed to interest them, I should be ashamed to have it printed and sent to other children. So I read it to several. Some of them were quite large children, larger than any of you, and the others were small. One of them was 9 years old, and one 7, and one 6, and one 5. And when I saw them smile, as if they were pleased, I was very glad indeed. And when one of them said she hoped I would print as many as 2, one for her and one for her cousin, I felt still more delighted, and thought I would have one for everybody's cousin. A great many little Johnnies and Gordies, many little Nellies and Hatties, will read about Susy's birthdays. Wherein she was good, I hope you all will be like her, and then your birthdays will be happy ones. Sometimes little children don't live to spend 6 birthdays in this world. They go to heaven and spend them there, and they are better and happier days than any little Susy ever knew. But now I must bid you good-bye. Perhaps I shall write another story for you one of these days. Aunt Susan. Little Susy's 6 Birthdays, Chapter 1. The First Birthday. Little Susy is a year old today, said her mamma, and I must give her a birthday kiss. So she kissed the sweet red lips of the darling baby. Now Susy had never kissed anybody in her life. She did not know how, but I suppose she thought it was high time to begin, now that she was a whole year old. So she doubled up her lips and gave her mamma the funniest little bit of a kiss you can imagine. Her mamma was pleased, and Susy was pleased herself, and I dare say she thought she was doing something great, as she saw everybody laughing. Pretty soon her papa came in, and then baby doubled up her lips and gave him a little bit of a kiss too. Now all this was early in the morning, and Susy was in her nightgown. But her mamma washed and dressed her very nicely, and put on her red frock and clean white apron, and those tiny shoes that looked as if they were made for a doll, and then Susy had some breakfast, good bread and milk. After this she slipped down from her mamma's lap to play with a string of spools that lay on the floor. She played with them a great while, but then she grew tired of sitting upon the floor, so she threw down her spools and got up, as if she thought of taking a walk. But she did not walk, she only stood there, smiling at her mamma. She was afraid to try to walk. She thought she should fall if she tried to walk. Then her mamma took up a box of seals and held them out towards Susy, and when Susy saw them, she wanted them so very much that she forgot all about her fear of falling, and ran to her mamma as fast as she could. Oh, how glad she felt that she had walked a few steps, and how glad her mamma was, too. And how she kissed her dear baby, while the little thing played with the pretty seals, rattling them about and laughing so. By and by a lady called to see Susy's mamma. She had a great black dog with her, bigger than Susy. Oh, a great deal bigger. He would come in, though the lady was ashamed to see him trot into the parlour, and tried to coax him out. Susy liked the dog. She was not afraid of him. He put his cold nose on her face and hands, and that made her laugh. This lady had brought something for Susy. What do you think it was? Why, a large doll, almost as large as Susy herself. When Susy saw it, she laughed and held out her arms and said, "Baby, baby." She loved this baby dearly. Somebody taught her to call it Peggy. That is not a very pretty name, is it? Another lady, indeed I may as well tell you who it was, her grandmamma, sent her a little silver fork. The baby is all worn out now, and hasn't any head at all, but the fork is as good as ever, and Susy uses it at dinner and at breakfast still. As soon as it began to grow dark, her mamma took Susy in her lap, and sang to her that sweet little song which Aunt Lizzie had given her. Aunt Lizzie heard it in Germany, and she liked it so well when she heard it sung to German babies that she thought she would translate it for her little nieces and nephews at home. Here it is. Mother, now tell, why do you love your baby so well? The mother said, oh, and do you not know? Sweet and happy it lies, it frets not nor cries, and is full of its glee as the bird on the tree. It smiles on my breast as it goes to its nest, and it wakes in its bliss with a smile and a kiss. And that is the reason I love it so well. How dearly, I never can tell. Baby, now tell, why do you love your mother so well? The baby said, oh, and do you not know? She keeps me from harm, holds me soft on her arm, and if I am ill, watches over me still, gives me good things to eat, and kisses so sweet, and is kindest to me of all that I see. And that is the reason I love her so well. How dearly, I never can tell. By this time Susy began to feel tired and sleepy, so her mamma undressed her, and she was put into her warm nest, and was soon fast asleep. I suppose thousands of little girls and boys spent this day very much as Susy did. It was their first birthday, too. But do you suppose Susy's papa and mamma would have given her away to take one of those other babies instead? No, I am sure not. Chapter 2. The Second Birthday. Susy lived 364 days, and then came her second birthday. I suppose you think she was very old indeed if she had lived so many days. But no, she was only 2 years old. When she awoke on this bright Tuesday morning, she was carried into her mamma's room, and her mamma took her right into her bed and gave her 2 birthday kisses, one on her mouth and one on her cheek. Then Susy began to play with something. What do you think it was? A doll? No. A kitty? No. It was a little live baby, her own darling brother Robbie. He was about as many months old as Susy had lived years. Susy loved him dearly. She never cried when she saw her mamma take baby in her arms and kiss him. She would have liked to take him in her own little arms. By and by her mamma said to her, Susy, you are 2 years old today. Now Susy did not know what this meant, so she only smiled and said, Robbie, Robbie, you got 2 eyes. It was now time for Susy to be washed and dressed. Her mamma did not do this for her now. You know she had a little baby to take care of. After breakfast, Susy came to her mamma with an orange in her hand. Her papa had given it to her. Susy told her mamma it was a ball. I suppose she could not say orange. Her papa took the great Bible in his hand, and Susy knew she must sit still in her little chair. She went all around the room before she could find it. Then she sat down in it by her papa, and said to Robbie, Baby be till, papa say be till. You see, she could not say still. While her papa prayed, Susy was playing with pins. She did not know it was naughty to do so. After prayers, she began to make a pretty baby house in one corner of the room. It was very pretty indeed. But Susy thought she could make a better one, so she pulled it down, threw her toys all about the floor, and began again. When she had played in this way more than an hour, she began to feel tired. Then her mamma thought it was time to give her her birthday present. So she put baby down upon the bed and went into the closet and brought out a little table. It had a drawer in it, and Susy was so pleased when she saw that. She thought she must say a big word now, so she lifted up her little hands and said, Oh my, I tonished! This made her mamma laugh, and she took down Susy's box of cups and saucers and placed them upon the table, and gave Susy a cracker, broken in small pieces. Then Susy sat down at the table and began to make believe to pour out tea, and to eat the cracker. Pretty soon she got up and offered Robbie a cup of tea, but Robbie did not take it. Then Susy looked grieved, but soon she began to smile again, for her mamma took the tiny cup and drank all the tea there was in it. By this time Susy was very tired, and said she was going a heap. She could not say asleep. So she went and stretched herself on a box and fell fast asleep. Her mamma covered her up with one of Robbie's blankets. Susy had taken a fancy to sleep on this box. It was soft and covered with chintz. Some of Robbie's clothes were kept in it. Chapter 3. The Second Birthday, continued. Little Susy slept 2 hours. When she awoke, her cheeks were very red, and she looked as sober and grave as a judge. Her mamma had been making a new dress for her, but she knew it would not do to try it on now, because Susy did not feel very pleasant. Robbie was asleep, so his mamma took Susy in her arms and kissed her, and said, "Now we must cut paper babies." So she began to cut rows of babies, and Susy grew bright and happy, and patted her kind mamma's face, saying, "Darling mamma," over and over again. It was snowing, or Susy would have had a nice walk. She liked to see it snow. She used to sit in her high chair at the window, watch the white flakes coming down, and try to catch them in her hands. So, when she grew tired of playing with the babies, her mamma took her to the window. But just then Susy's dinner was brought in. I must tell you what it was. There was a slice of toast, sprinkled with salt and covered with rich new milk. Then there was a mealy potato, and a small piece of boiled chicken. So Susy ran to her little table, pulled off the cups and saucers, and made room for her dinner. The toast was cut in little square pieces, and she ate that first. She liked it very much. Then she ate the chicken, and that tasted so good that she thought it would be a fine plan to cry for more. But just as she was drawing her dear little face up into very ugly wrinkles, her mamma came towards her and said, "Susy, do you want to go to the fair?" Now Susy did not know what that meant, but she smiled and said she should like to go. A lady had called for her in a carriage, so her mamma, as soon as Susy stopped eating, put on her new dress, and was going to finish dressing her. But Susy felt so happy and so refreshed by her dinner that she could not keep still. She kept running all about the room, making funny little curtsies and saying, "How d'ye do, mamma?" and "Susy, go away, leave mamma." At last her mamma caught the little witch, and her coat and hat and mittens, and I don't know what not, were put on. And then away went Susy in the carriage with that kind friend who loved her so dearly. When they got back from the fair, it was beginning to grow dark a little. Her mamma had kept running to the window and saying, "Oh, I wonder Susy does not come." Susy had her hands full of toys and candy and cake. She ran to kiss her dear mamma and Robbie, and offered all her candy to her papa, who thanked her, and put it in his pocket. He did not like to have Susy eat candy. And now it was time for bed. But Susy was so full of fun that it was hard to hold her. She ran and hid behind the great chair, and crept under the bed, and laughed and shouted and clapped her little hands, till at last she was tired out. So then she came and stood still, and ate a little bit of toast, and pretty soon went to bed. Her mamma put her to bed herself, and then she sat down by Robbie's cradle and sung to him and Susy this little song. "Sleep, sleep, sleep, little darlings, sleep, for your mother is nigh. She watches your slumbers, sees that no danger is nigh. Sleep, 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 for your mother is nigh. Sleep, 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 little darlings, sleep, for the angels are nigh. They watch o'er your slumbers, see that no danger is nigh. Sleep, 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 for the angels are nigh. Sleep, 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 little darlings. Sleep, for the Saviour is nigh. He watches your slumbers, sees that no danger is nigh. Sleep, 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 for the Saviour is nigh. Chapter 4. The Third Birthday. When Susy awoke on the morning of her 3rd birthday, she said, "Now I am going to give Mamma 3 kisses." So she crept softly out of bed and ran on her little bare feet to the door of the nursery where her mamma slept with Robbie, who was not very well. She opened the door and peeped in, smiling and looking so lovely and so loving that her mamma wanted to snatch her up and kiss her. She held out her arms, and Susy ran and climbed up the side of the bed and gave both Mamma and Robbie a great many hugs and kisses. And her mamma gave her 3 birthday kisses, 1 on her lips and 1 on each cheek. Robbie was more than a year old now. He could not speak a word and had not learned to walk yet. But his little heart was brimful of love, and he put his arms around Susy's neck and patted her soft cheek, and seemed very glad to see her. As soon as the children were washed and dressed, it was time for breakfast. Susy sat at the table with her papa and mamma, and was very happy. After breakfast, they all went up into the nursery together, and there they found upon the table Noah's Ark. Some kind friend had sent it to Susy. It was a famous little ark, and besides all sorts of beasts and birds, Susy found Mr. and Mrs. Noah and all their family inside. This made her begin to dance up and down and clap her hands, and when Robbie saw her do that, he laughed and clapped his hands too. Susy sat down upon the floor and played with her ark a great while. And while she played, she talked to the beasts and the birds, and told them it was her birthday, and asked them if they didn't wish it was their birthday too. And she told them every now and then, "I'm going to have a party. I'm going to have a party." After a while her mamma came and took Susy into her lap and read to her a little story, and then she kissed Susy a great many times, and said God was very good to let her have such a darling child 3 years. Just then there came a ring at the door, and here came into the nursery a great bundle, wrapped in a linen napkin. When Susy's mamma saw that it was something for her little girl, she let her take out all the pins from the napkin, and pretty soon out rolled a baby. Oh, a beautiful baby, with real shoes on its feet, and a hat on its head, and a box full of dresses besides. It was sent by the same lady who sent the first doll, about which I told you. She thought Peggy must be worn out by this time. The moment Susy saw this new baby, she ran to find poor Peggy, which she thrust into Robbie's arms, saying, "There, you little darling, now you shall have a baby too." Robbie was very glad. He took Peggy in his arms, with her feet up and head down, and began to pat her, and say bye-bye, bye-bye, which made Susy laugh. But it was getting time for his nap, so Susy and her mamma left the nursery, and went downstairs to let Papa see the birthday presents. He was very glad to see them. He took Susy on his knee while she showed him the ark, and all the dogs and cats and doves and ravens there were in it. Then she let him peep at her new doll, and as soon as he had seen it, and had been made to kiss it, Susy and her mamma went out to take a walk. Chapter 5. The Third Birthday, continued. When they came in from their walk, Robbie was awake, and Susy said it was time for her party to begin. You will wonder who she expected to see at this party, so I must tell you at once that nobody had been invited but Robbie and all the dolls. And a funny little party they made, I can tell you. Susy set out her table, and a cup and saucer for each one, also a plate and spoon for each. Then her mamma filled the little teapot with milk tea, as Susy called it, and gave her some sponge cakes, and a few sugar plums, and an orange nicely cut. And then they all sat down to the feast, Susy and her new doll on one side, and Robbie and Peggy and old black Dinah on the other. Robbie was a dear little boy. He did not pull the cups about or snatch the cake. He sat very still, and opened his mouth now and then when Susy offered him a little tea or a crumb of cake. The dollies, too, were very good. They did not fall over upon their faces, as some ill-bred dollies do, nor slip down from their chairs, nor push each other. They sat as still as mice, and behaved far better than mice would have done. Susy thought her party a very nice affair, and I think her papa and mamma did too, for I saw them peeping in at the nursery door, laughing and rejoicing. Susy was a very busy little girl. She was always at work upon something, as if she felt afraid she should not get out of each day all the fun there was in it. So as soon as she had eaten up all there was on the table, with the help of mamma and nurse, she began to play again. She made a great yard with a fence around it. The fence was made of blocks, and put her animals into the yard. Her papa sat down on the floor and helped her make it, and showed her how to drive her cattle in. Susy was delighted, and she said to them, "Now, beasts, I am going away, and you must be very good while I am gone. Don't snatch each other's things away. Don't make each other cry." Then she made believe go out to walk, and when she came back she found they had all been very good indeed. She said she should give them each a book if they were always so good. Shouldn't you think they might have laughed when she said that? Well, they did not. They looked just as they did before, and as if they did not hear a word she said. Susy was so busy that she did not notice how dark it was growing. Now, every night, when it began to grow dark, her mamma used to take her in her lap, and tell her stories and sing to her. All at once it grew so dark that she could not see to play. Then she remembered it was time to pick up her toys. While she was doing this, Robbie crept about, gathering up his, but he did not touch hers. Chapter 6. The Third Birthday, concluded. When the toys had all been put nicely away, nurse gave Robbie his supper, and Susy went down to her mamma. It was dark in the parlour, but the firelight made it pleasant. Susy climbed into her usual place and said, "Please sing, mamma." "What shall I sing about?" asked mamma. Susy thought a little while, and at last she said, "About a little kitty." Now her mamma did not know any verses about a little kitty, but she did not like to refuse Susy, so she began to sing. Once there was a little kitty, whiter than snow. In a barn she used to frolic, long time ago. In the barn a little mousie ran to and fro, for she heard the kitty coming, long time ago. 2 eyes had little kitty, black as a sloe, and they spied the little mousie, long time ago. 4 paws had little kitty, paws soft as dough, and they caught the little mousie, long time ago. 9 teeth had little kitty, all in a row, and they bit the little mousie, long time ago. When the teeth bit little mousie cried, "Oh!" but she got away from kitty, long time ago. Susy was just going to cry when she heard that the little mousie was bitten, but her mamma made haste to comfort her by singing that Mousie got away, long ago. She had to sing it a great many times after this, for Robbie soon was old enough to like to hear about kitties. "Now, mamma, please tell me one story," said Susy, "about the little fly that hadn't any breakfast." So her mamma told it to her, though I suppose Susy had heard it 50 times, and then there were some little hymns sung. By this time Susy's supper was ready, and when she had eaten it, she kissed her dear papa and mamma, and said her prayers, and went trotting up to bed. Chapter 7. The Fourth Birthday. Susy was very much surprised on the morning of the day she was 4 years old, to hear her mamma call her to come and take her 4 birthday kisses. She had forgotten all about birthdays, it was so long since she had had one. She sprang out of bed and ran into her mamma, who kissed her, this time on her mouth, on each cheek, and her forehead, and seemed to love her even more than usual. Soon after breakfast she took Susy away into that little room to which she was in the habit of going alone, and they knelt down together and held each other's hands, while mamma thanked God very much for giving her such a dear little girl, and for letting her live 4 years, and asked him, if he pleased, to let her live another year, and to make her his own little lamb. Susy was very happy to think she had been called God's own little lamb, and she kissed her mamma, and said she loved Jesus, and meant to be a good girl, because he was so good. Then they went into the nursery, and Susy's papa gave her a beautiful book full of pictures, and a great number of new blocks. Susy liked the book best, but she liked the blocks too, and she and papa and Robbie built a castle, which she said looked like the Tower of Babel. Robbie was full of fun, and he soon overturned the tower, shouting with all his might when he heard the noise it made in falling. Susy did not think it fair for Robbie to spoil her play, but her papa said he was such a little boy, she must excuse him. Then Robbie ran up to her, saying, "Peas cues, Robbie," and kissed her and patted her face, so Susy had to smile and forgive him, he was such a little darling. After that they built several castles, on purpose for him to overturn, and Susy was happy all day because she had given up her own pleasure just to gratify him. Now Susy's mamma was very busy getting ready for the birthday party. This time they expected somebody besides Robbie and the Dollies. Mamma had written and sent invitations to Frank and Charlie, Susy's cousins, and to little Hattie Linton, who was visiting them. They were to come early and stay till dark, and Frank's mother and Hattie's aunt were coming too, for they loved to see children happy. At 12 o'clock they all arrived, and there was a great time getting off cloaks and hoods and tippets and mittens, and Charlie had to display his jacket and trousers, which he never had worn till this day, and Frank was in a hurry to see Susy's presents, and so they all talked and laughed together. Only Susy and Hattie were standing all this time, looking very gravely at each other, Susy holding fast to her mamma's hand, and Hattie squeezing up as close to her aunt as possible. Susy thought Hattie a sweet little girl, after she had looked at her a long time, and she ran to Frank and said to him, "Hattie Linton may have my best doll all day." "Oh, Cousin Hattie, hear what Susy says," cried Frank. "She's my cousin too," said Susy. "No, she isn't. She's only your cousin-in-law," said Frank. Everybody laughed on hearing this, at least all the mothers and aunties did, and Frank looked very pleased with the new relationship he had invented. Chapter 8. The Fourth Birthday Continued. Susy then led her cousins, and her cousin-in-law, up to the nursery, where all her toys were brought out, and Robbie was waiting patiently in his little chair. Frank and Charlie ran to kiss him, and after a few moments Hattie went and kissed him too. He and Hattie looked a little like each other, Frank said. They had both fair curling hair and black eyes and round rosy cheeks. Robbie felt very shy for some time after Hattie had kissed him. He sat still in his chair with his eyes fixed upon the ground, and his hands lay folded in his lap. But before long he began to play with his blocks, and all the other children sat around him on the floor, helping him. Susy felt like a little queen. Everybody was so kind to her, and the children all kept saying, "Let's do as Susy says. It's her birthday." Oh, how they played! Frank built such noble houses, and Charlie arranged the little village so nicely, and Hattie held tightly in her arms Susy's doll, taking care to keep near Robbie all the time, so as to kiss his soft white neck every now and then. When they had played quietly a long time, Frank wanted to play hide the handkerchief, and he said, Susy must hide it first because it is her birthday." Frank was 6 years old, and he knew how to play this, and a great many other things. So he made all the children cover their eyes, and then showed Susy where to put the handkerchief. They all liked this play. Even little Robbie ran about pretending to look in all the nooks and corners, and when it came Frank's turn to hide the handkerchief, he contrived to hide it in a place Robbie peeped into every time. Oh, how Robbie laughed when he found it! Robbie's nurse kept her eye upon her little pet, for she was afraid he might get hurt among the other children. But they were all gentle, good children, and were so happy and pleasant that even a little bird might have played safely with them. "How old are you, Robbie?" said Hattie, putting her arms around him. Robbie did not know. His nurse said he was a little more than 2 years. "Did he have a birthday too?" asked Hattie. "Oh, yes, indeed he did," said nurse. And she opened a drawer and showed Hattie some new toys and books which were given him on the day he was 2 years old. Just as the other children came running to look at Robbie's drawer, which was full of toys and books, a bell rang downstairs. Nurse said this was to call them down, so she took Robbie in her arms, Frank led Susy, and Charlie and Hattie followed, till they reached the dining room. Chapter 9. The Fourth Birthday Continued. When they entered the dining room, they found Susy's papa and mamma and Frank's mamma and aunt waiting for them, and in the midst of the floor stood a round table, covered with a white cloth. A nice little feast was spread upon the table, not exactly dinner and not exactly tea, but very pleasant to the eyes of the children, who were all hungry after their play. Now the parents of these children did not approve of overfeeding little folks with sweet things, but they had provided everything they could think of that would be safe to eat. Besides, Susy's papa had been to a wedding party the previous evening, and a lady had sent to Susy a great many mottos and some delicious grapes. Some of these were arranged prettily on the table, and the children were lifted into their seats, and Susy, looking very grave indeed, began to pour out for each a tiny cup of cocoa. Frank said he should like to sit there and pour it out as he was the eldest, but his mother laughed at him a little, and said she never heard of such a thing as a gentleman's pouring out tea when ladies were present. Charlie said he wanted to pour out because he was the youngest, but his mamma laughed at him too, saying Hattie and Robbie were both younger than he. So Charlie gave up very pleasantly, and was very happy, drinking his cocoa and eating small thin slices of bread and butter. And so were they all. Even Robbie, on this great occasion, had a little of everything. But he was a good boy, and when his nurse asked him to let her save his mottos and grapes till tomorrow, he gave them all to her. I wish I could tell you how they all looked, sitting there, talking as fast as their tongues could fly, and enjoying all the good things so pleasantly. Susy was so happy that she could not help throwing her arms about Hattie, who sat next to her, and kissing her many times, and she kept all the largest grapes for Robbie, and offered the big pieces of cake to her cousins, though they were too polite to take them. I think nobody enjoyed this feast more than the grown folks, though they only sat and looked on. Little children do not know how dearly their papas and mammas love them. When everyone had had enough, they were taken down from their high chairs, and the big books on which some of them sat, and Susy's papa made believe he was a lion, and that they were nice fat little things just fit for him to eat up. So he began to growl and to scamper all about the room, and the children ran and laughed and crept under the sofas and hid behind their mammas, and I began to be afraid the house would come down, they made such a noise. At last the lion caught Susy, and while he was eating her up, the other children sat down to take breath, for they were as tired as they could be. Frank went and whispered to his mamma, and she whispered to Hattie's aunt, and at last Frank said he was trying to persuade his mamma to ask Hattie to repeat a piece of poetry. Hattie was not yet 3 years old, but she could repeat a great many stories and poems, and it was very pleasant to hear such a little girl do this. But I will tell you about it in the next chapter. Chapter 10. The Fourth Birthday, concluded. Little Hattie was lifted up to a seat on the table, where all could see her, and the children arranged themselves where they could hear her. Susy got upon her papa's knee, who kept kissing her and loving her dearly. Robbie ran to his mamma's lap, and Frank and Charlie were in low chairs close by their mother. Then Hattie began in a soft, clear voice, and repeated that beautiful hymn, "I think when I read that sweet story of old," and said every word so clearly and distinctly that not one was lost. Then she said the first chapter of John. I do wish you could have heard her. She was then lifted down, and they all thanked her for the pleasure she had given them, and Susy's mamma asked her if she could sing. She said she could, and Frank and Charlie said they could sing too. So they all sang, "There is a Happy Land." Now Robbie listened as hard as he could, and wanted to sing too, but he did not know how. Only whenever they were going to say "Happy Land," he would shout, "Happy Lamb!" And this pleased the children so much that they kept singing the hymn over and over, just to hear his little eager voice come in at every verse. They sang "Mary Had a Little Lamb" after this, and other songs. And then Susy begged her mamma to sing the funny German song she and Robbie were so fond of. Mamma was almost ashamed to sing it before all those grown-up folks, but she did not like to refuse Susy, so she began thus. The moon it shines, the baby whines, the clock strikes 12, it's getting too late to toil and delve. In quiet nights the mousie bites, the clock strikes 1, may naughty dreams little cradles shun. Little Bo Peep is fast asleep, the clock strikes 2, may good girls be many, of naughty girls few. The wind it blows, the cock he crows, the clock strikes 3, the ship sails quietly over the sea. The horse says nay, he wants some hay, the clock strikes 4, the coach is standing before the door. The hen cackles, the duck quackles, the clock strikes 6, time to get up and pick mother some sticks. The cook will bake a nice little cake, the clock strikes 7, put on the pudding and boil till 11. You shall be fed with milk and bread, the clock strikes 8. Come, eat your breakfast before it's too late. The children liked this song very much, but it was now time for Frank and Charlie and Hattie to go home. They kissed each other and were wrapped up, and away they went, and Susy and Robbie were soon fast asleep in their own little beds, getting ready for the next birthday next year. End of Part 1 of Little Susy's 6 Birthdays by Elizabeth Prentiss. Read by Darvinia.